Welcome to the Kwibuka podcast, written by Dr. Jean Damascene Bizimana, minister at Minubumwe, and recorded by Josue Ishema. After years of research, he has collected and compiled information on different actions that led to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. In this segment, we will talk about the distinct role of the militias in the preparation and execution of the 1994 genocide. Throughout the national territory, the mobilization for genocide targeted the recruitment of youth into paramilitary movements associated with political parties MRND and CEDER, named Interahamwe, which translates to those who act together. Those were from the MRND. From the CEDER, there was Imuza Mugambi, which translates to those who pursue the same goal. They were enlisted from poorly educated, disoriented, and manipulable youth who were often enticed with money, beer, and cannabis. This recruitment also included reservists from the army and gendarmerie. These militia cohorts underwent accelerated military training and ideological indoctrination, promoting anti-Tutsi hatred with approximately 200 to 500 men per prefecture. They trained in handling rifles and grenades, and firearms flooded both urban and rural areas, accompanied by new machetes in early 1994. On February 2, 1994, Major Hogg of the Belgian General Intelligence and Security Service prepared a 13-page report, which he submitted to various Belgian senior officers, including General Mertens from the Royal Military Household and the Minister of Defense's Chief of Staff. The report provided insight into the Interahamwe's plan to launch the genocide, involving different strategies. Firstly, launching attacks against Belgian soldiers of the United Nations Assistance for Rwanda, UNAMIR, to provoke their withdrawal, thereby weakening UNAMIR. And secondly, targeting Tutsi and members of opposition parties. The document specified that Interahamwe had the capabilities to execute this plan, as they were armed and had support from members of the Rwandan army, gendarmerie, and especially Habyarimana's presidential guard. In this podcast, we will demonstrate how the Interahamwe militia was a carefully organized institution, both nationally and locally across the country. The national leadership of the Interahamwe was structured as follows. Robert Kajuga was the president. Phineas Ruhumuriza was the first vice president. George Rutaganda was the second vice president. Eugene Barushimana was the secretary general. Dieudonné Niyitegeka was the treasurer general, and Emmanuel Mwalimu was the permanent secretary. The national advisors of the Interahamwe were Bernard Maniragaba, social and legal affairs; Joseph Serugendo, research and development; Jean-Pierre Sebanetsi, politics and propaganda; Ephraim Nyezavera, in charge of economy and finance; Jean-Marie Vianney Mudahinyuka, alias Zuzu, in charge of monitoring and evaluation; and finally, Alphonse Kalimba was in charge of foreign affairs and archives. The leadership of the Interahamwe in Kigali had specific organs with different responsibilities to support the executive committee and propagate its ideology. The Kigali City Interahamwe Committee was led by Abubakar Turatsinze, better known as Jean-Pierre. He was assisted by the following: Seranfet Kwahirwa, the first vice president; Alois Ngirabatware, the second vice president; Epimac Uwizeye, the secretary who worked at UNDP; Muhozi, the treasurer, rumored to be the President Habyarimana's cousin. He managed the Tam Tam Bar in Nyamirambo. Valérie Bemeriki, a renowned host at RTLM, was a member of the National Steering Committee of the Interahamwe and part of the Prefectural Committee in Butare. She claimed that Turatsinze was a close friend of Mathieu Ngirumpatse, who had gifted him a Suzuki Samurai car used to spread the genocide ideology. The fuel was supplied by the MRND General Secretariat, as was customary for all Interahamwe leaders. Ngirumpatse assisted Turatsinze in obtaining a loan from Besser, which he never repaid. The approval of this loan was facilitated by Ephraim Nyezavera and Claver Mbuyekure, both originating from Gisenyi and high-ranking officials at the Commercial Bank of Rwanda, Besser. Turatsinze, alongside a certain Paulin, Alois Ngirabatware's younger brother, and Sebatware, the head of the Interahamwe, responsible for protecting MRND's top authorities, were among those tasked with distributing weapons nationwide. It was Turatsinze who, in January 1994, revealed to General Dallaire that the Interahamwe possessed numerous weapons and were prepared to massacre Tutsi to the extent of killing 1,000 every 20 minutes. Dallaire conveyed this information to the UN, requesting permission to search and seize these weapons, but he did not receive approval from the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, then led by Kofi Annan. This select committee prepared and supervised all Interahamwe actions, also coordinating its branches in Kigali. The Interahamwe organizational structure included several sections described as follows. The intelligence section was led by Gaparata, a reservist residing in Kimichanga. Valérie Bemeriki claimed that this section was tasked with infiltrating opposition parties to gather information on their activities and plans. It particularly monitored parties considered Tutsi-led, such as PL, aiming to destabilize them. The intelligence section also watched the behavior of Tutsi MRND members labeled Ibyitso, or collaborators who had infiltrated the MRND. Before any Interahamwe event, the intelligence section had to ensure its smooth execution. Their mission also involved identifying Tutsi residences, monitoring their daily lives, and infiltrating them to learn about RPF's objectives. Secondly was the intervention section. This was headed by Aloys Ngirabatware, who also commanded the Giporoso Interahamwe, known as Inyange. Ngirabatware worked for a Rwandan public insurance institution, Sonarwa. This militia's role was to assist their colleagues wherever they encountered problems and rescue any MRND activist. They attacked locations where Interahamwe were assaulted by members of other parties. The principle of this section was that if an Interahamwe was killed, they would avenge it by killing at least 10 Tutsi or opposition party members. This section mainly consisted of army reservists trained in assassination techniques by the Rwandan armed forces and French military in Gabiro, Gako, Mukamira, and Bigogwe camps. Furthermore, there was the mobilization and recruitment section. This was led by Andre Nzabanterura, residing in Kimihurura and currently detained at Nyarugenge prison. He was assisted by Serafin Twahirwa, a Minitrap agent living in Gikondo near steel premises, now used for commercial exhibitions. This section's duties included propagating MRND and Interahamwe ideology and recruiting fearless youth nationwide. Among recruits, they selected the strongest and most extremist who harbored visceral hatred toward Tutsi. These recruits underwent training in murder techniques and firearm handling to be used in assassinations and other violent acts. The section was also responsible for preparing messages, demonstrations, and youth mobilization meetings for MRND membership and Interahamwe involvement. All these sections were supervised by the National Interahamwe Committee, presided over by Robert Kajuga and his commissioners. The Interahamwe structure also included information section, which was led by Claude Nchimiye, residing in Kacyiru and working at Rwanda's Social Fund. This section collected daily information on political activities in Kigali, collaborating with the intelligence section. They also worked in coordination with infiltrated Interahamwe in other parties. The collected information was reproduced in MRND media, spreading Hutu power ideology such as the Interahamwe newspaper, directed by Tatien Hahozayezu. This section's information emphasized Hutu mobilization, the benefits of the 1959 revolution, the rights of the majority, and propaganda to awaken Hutu to the idea that Tutsi were enemies of the 1959 revolution. The structure also included the animation section. This section was led by Haji Ndaitabi, who is believed to have passed away, assisted by Haji Gahungu, currently living in Sweden. Their mission was to organize all political events and MRND ceremonies. They composed songs, dances, and games that animated MRND meetings. They created styles of clothing like wearing banana bark and invented modes of behavior, such as attaching themselves with strings to the backs of vehicles to attend meetings. All these sections often had to produce reports for the National Interahamwe Committee. A summary was then sent to the MRND General Secretariat, led by Mathieu Ngirumpatse. Every Wednesday, section and committee presidents met in a meeting held at the Kwibuka building in Muhima. The propaganda disseminated aimed to galvanize Hutu and convince them to exterminate their Tutsi neighbors. Each sector, down to the village level, had an Interahamwe leader. These leaders were responsible for implementing decisions made by the steering committee and the aforementioned sections. In the city of Kigali, some of them were as follows. In Kimisagara sector, Interahamwe attacks were launched from the homes of Shadrach Bwenge, Rose Karushara, a sector councillor in Kimisagara, or Asteri Mukangwije, a close friend of Mathieu Ngirumpatse. Mukangwije is currently detained for the crime of genocide at Nyarugenge prison. In Rugenge sector, there was Angeline Mukandutiye Sahunguye, primary school inspector for Nyarugenge and president of the Interahamwe in the Rugenge sector. She was assisted by Odette Nyirabagenzi. In the Gikondo sector, Interahamwe were led by Serafet Twahirwa, an employee at the Ministry of Public Works and Energy, Minitrap. Twahirwa was sentenced to life imprisonment by the Brussels Assize Court in December 2023 after being found guilty of genocide crimes, including numerous rapes. In the Remera Giporoso sector, Aloys Ngirabatware led the Inyange militia. He worked at Sonarwa. There was another famous militia in Remera called Abazulu. In Gitichinyoni sector, Interahamwe were led by Joseph Setiba. He is currently detained at Nyarugenge prison. In Kabeza sector, the president of the Interahamwe was Enoch Kayondo, also known as Phineas Gakumba. He participated in the genocide in Kigali, Muli, and Mukingo. He is currently living in France. In Chimichanga sector, Interahamwe were led by Gaparata, who also headed the intelligence section. In Kyahafi sector, Interahamwe were led by Ziragobora, an employee at Minitrap. In Muhima sector, Interahamwe were led by Habiyaremye. In Kimirongo sector, Interahamwe were led by Hajabakiga, who worked at Minitrap. In Kichukiro sector, Interahamwe were led by a certain Buffalo. In Nyamirambo sector, Interahamwe were led by Haji Ndaitabi and Haji Gahungu. In Nyakabanda sector, Interahamwe were led by Sukali, who is currently detained at Nyarugenge prison. In Kimihurura sector, Interahamwe were led by Andre Nzabanterura, a merchant. He transported Interahamwe in his vehicle to various locations where he committed atrocities. He is currently detained at the Nyarugenge prison. In Gitega sector, Interahamwe were led by a person named Pekos. In Gatsata sector, Interahamwe were led by Epimac Uwizeye. In Kigali Commercial District, Interahamwe were led by Jean Habyarimana, who is also detained at Nyarugenge prison. Finally, in Chirongi sector, Interahamwe were led by Asumani Kavura, who succeeded Paul Karasira, who had passed away. Throughout the entire national territory, the training and arming of the Interahamwe was ensured through the Civil Self-Defense Program, initiated by President Habyarimana in 1991. The decision was made to appoint individuals to coordinate the distribution of weapons and training of killers across the country in collaboration with prefects and mayors. At the national level, Colonel Atanas Gasake was entrusted with the Civil Self-Defense Program with collaborators in the following prefectures. In the city of Kigali, the one leading the Civil Self-Defense Program was Commander Patrice Bivan in collaboration with Kigali Prefect Colonel Tarsis Renzaho. In Kibungo, it was led by Colonel Pierre Celestin Gwagafirita, while in Kigali-Ngari, it was led by Major Stanislas Chinyoni. In Cyangugu, it was led by Colonel Claudien Singirankabo. In Gitarama, it was led by Major Jean Damascene Bizimana. In Butare, it was led by Colonel Alphonse Nsiryayo. In Gikongoro, it was led by Colonel Aloys Simba. In the prefectures of Byumba, Gisenyi, and Ruhengeri, the civil self-defense was led by military commanders, namely Colonel Juvenal Bahufite in Byumba, Colonel Anatole Tsengiyumva in Gisenyi, and Colonel Augustin Bizimungu in Ruhengeri, later replaced by Colonel Marcel Bivugabagabo in April 1994, when Bizimungu became Chief of Staff, replacing Colonel Marcel Gatsinzi. To support these military officials, The government also appointed ministers in their home prefectures to coordinate the activities of the Interahamwe militias in collaboration with the leaders of civil self-defense and prefects. These ministers were highly active from mid-April to July 1994, including Pauline Nyiramasuhuko in Butare, Augustin Ngirabatware in Gisenyi, Joseph Nzirorera, MRND Secretary General in 1994, Dr. Casimir Bizimungu in Ruhengeri, Calix Nzawonimpa in Gitarama, Justin Mugenzi and Prosper Mugiraneza in Kibungo, André Ntagerura in Cyangugu, and 4 ministers in the Kibuye Prefecture, namely Agnes Ntamabyariro, Emmanuel Ndindabahizi, Eliezer Niyitegeka, and Edouard Karemera. Several ministers were convicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, for their role in supporting the Interahamwe, including being found guilty of conspiracy to commit genocide. This includes the former Minister of Information, Eliezer Niyitegeka, who was determined by the ICTR to have participated in meetings preparing for the extermination of Tutsi, spoke at this meeting to discuss the killing of the Tutsi present in Bisesero, planned attacks against the Tutsi present in Bisesero, and promised and distributed weapons intended to be used in attacks against the Tutsi. His actions, leaving no doubt about his intention, led the court to recognize his individual criminal responsibility for conspiracy to commit genocide. Eliezer Niyitegeka was sentenced to life imprisonment and passed away in custody at the UN prison in Mali on March 28, 2018, while serving his sentence. It is important to inform the public that the idea of establishing militia units was proposed to President Habyarimana by his French military advisor, Lieutenant Colonel Gilbert Canovas, in a note dated April 30, 1991. The note advised the president to create trained and armed civilian units to assist the army in controlling the Mutara zones. This idea was later expanded nationwide, giving rise to the infamous Interahamwe. From late 1992 until 1994, the MRND's Interahamwe militia and the CEDER's Impuzamugambi constantly received military training. Their teams took turns training in certain military camps or carefully selected sites. For instance, in 1993, 425 Interahamwe underwent training at the Gako military camp in Bugesera. Another group of 300 Interahamwe Impuzamugambi and the Palipehutu militia from Burundi trained in the Nyandungu Valley near Kigali, which served as a training center for paracommandos from the Kanombe camp. Training occurred daily, led by paracommandos from the Kanombe military camp between midnight and 4 a.m. Similar training took place under the supervision of Rwandan and French military personnel from the Assistance and Military Instruction Detachment DAMI in Gako, Gabiro, Bigogwe, Mukamira, and Nyakinama. After these training sessions, the Interahamwe were deployed nationwide under the supervision of mayors. In the Gabiro camp, training was overseen by Captain Engineer Faustin Ntirikina and Major Vincent Rwabukwisi. Both played significant roles during the genocide. Currently, Ntirikina resides in France, having acquired citizenship. He was one of the witnesses in Judge Brugger's proceedings. In 1992, among the Interahamwe who trained at Gabiro, some hailed from the Muvumba commune in Byumba prefecture, such as Emmanuel Mwumvaneza, Elias Nkurunziza, the advisor to the Karama sector, Sylvestre Munyandinda, the agriculture instructor, and Jean Damascene Kaurame. In 1993, Jean-Baptiste Dushimimana's team from Kigali in Gatenga, including Hassan Nsabimana, Marine Mulindankiko, Jean Damascene Garambe, and others, were transported to the military camp of Gabiro in an Onatracom bus for training. Emmanuel Ndindabahizi, one of the military trainers, spoke with the Mucho Commission investigating France's role in the genocide. He revealed that the Interahamwe trained in shooting but focused more on techniques for quickly killing many people in a short time with traditional weapons. Joseph Setiba, the Interahamwe leader in Chirongi commune, trained in Gabiro in 1992, informed the Mucho Commission that around 600 to 700 Interahamwe trained during that time. At Nyakinama campus, the Interahamwe trained alongside new recruits of the Rwandan army. The Interahamwe wore civilian attire allowing them to be distinguished from the military. The Mucho Commission learned through the testimony of Colonel Martin Damascene, a former FARC member, that these trainings were conducted by French military personnel under the command of Colonel Jacques Chollet. Other witnesses include former students of this campus, such as Élisée Usengimana, a former deputy currently detained for genocide crimes, Gérard Ndabakenga, Simugonga Fidel, and others. Training was regularly conducted at the Gako military camp from 1992. Some Interahamwe who trained there alongside military personnel were deployed to Bugesera to carry out the massacres in March 1992. Pierre Celestin Seromba explained to the Mucho Commission that he witnessed Interahamwe training at Gako in February 1992. A statement corroborated by other witnesses including Jean-Claude Murejuru and Bernard Munyaneza, former gendarme of the Rwandan military intelligence, Lieutenant Jean de Dieu Tuyisenge, informed the Mucho Commission that he was among the military personnel involved in training the Interahamwe at Gako. Such military training occurred not only in mentioned military camps, but also in various locations across the country including Nyungwe Forest and tea plantations in Shagasha, Gisakura in Cyangugu, Mata, Kitabi in Gikongoro, Gisovu in Kibuye, Funda in Gisenyi, and the Mashuza cement factory. A highly efficient militia named Turihose, trained in Mukamira and Bigogwe, primarily deployed in Gisenyi and Ruhengeri prefectures. They received advanced military training to commit large-scale and rapid murders using cords and knives. After training, they returned home to train other Interahamwe. The recruitment of Interahamwe for training was overseen by the mayors, ensuring the selection of Hutu individuals based on their known ethnicity. Testimonies from Interahamwe trained in Mukamira and Bigogwe were from Oros Nisengwe, Jean Damascene Bizimana, Twaibu Sekanabo, Juma Mbarushimana, and finally Emmanuel Nchogozabahizi. Lieutenant Jean-Paul Ntuyenabo, an instructor of the Interahamwe with the French, testified before the Mucho Commission about the nature of training provided to the Turihose militia. Witnesses affirmed that since 1993, many Interahamwe received intensive training in lethal techniques at the Mukamira and Bigogwe military camps, with additional training centers in the Gishwati Forest, Rusumo, Bugarama, and more. These trainings coincided with the massive purchase and distribution of machetes, with 581,000 machetes distributed nationwide in March 1994, which was double the number purchased in 1992. After the genocide against the Tutsi and the defeat of the government that orchestrated it and its army, the architects of the genocide and the Interahamwe Impuzamugambi fled the country. Let's see what became of them. National MRND President Mathieu Ngirumpatse sought refuge in Mali and was arrested by the ICTR on June 17, 1998. His deputy, Edouard Karemera, went into exile in Togo, arrested by the ICTR on June 5, 1998. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment on December 21, 2011 by the ICTR, a sentence upheld on appeal. They were found guilty of genocide due to their actions and leadership of the Interahamwe. The tribunal concluded that they were part of a criminal association, Interahamwe, with a mission to exterminate the Tutsi population of Rwanda. They were convicted not only for their own criminal acts, but also for those committed by others acting on behalf of this association. The judges also held Karemera and Ngirumpatse responsible for the rapes and sexual violence committed by Interahamwe against Tutsi women and girls, considering this violence directly derived from their criminal enterprise. Additionally, they were found guilty of crimes committed by the administrative staff of the ministries controlled by the MRND. These were exemplary sanctions based on their hierarchical positions. The third accused in this trial, Joseph Nzirorera, former Secretary General of the MRND, exiled in Benin, was arrested by ICTR on June 5, 1998, but died on July 1 in 2010 before the conclusion of the trial. He was charged with the murder of numerous Tutsi, especially in his native region of Mukingo, in Ruhengeri Prefecture. Members of the National Interahamwe Steering Committee faced different fates. Some were fortunate while others died in misery. For example, Jerry Robert Kajuga, the national president of Interahamwe, reportedly died of AIDS in Kinshasa. As for the vice president of the Interahamwe, Phineas Ruhumuriza, he became a trader in his hometown, Gitarama, after serving as a corporal in the former Rwandan Armed Forces, ex-FAR. After the genocide, he sought refuge in Kenya, where he collaborated for a fee with investigators from the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, assisting them in gathering information about suspects. The ICTR relocated him to Côte d'Ivoire to distance him from the Great Lakes region. He passed away there in anonymity. Another vice president, Georges Rutaganda, an agronomical engineer from the National University of Rwanda and son of Esdras Mamo, ex-mayor of the Masango commune in Gitarama, fled to Zambia. He was arrested by the ICTR in 1995 and sentenced to life in 1999, a sentence which was upheld on appeal on May 26, 2003. Rutaganda was found guilty of genocide committed in Kigali during several expeditions he led, particularly the massacre of Tutsi refugees at Eto and on Nyanza Hill in Kicukiro. The ICTR also convicted him on killing Tutsi Emmanuel Kaitare with a machete at the Hindu Mandal temple in Gachinjiro. In June 2009, Rutaganda was transferred to Benin to serve his sentence. He died of AIDS on October 11, 2010. Secretary General Eugene Barushimana, son-in-law of Felicien Kabuga, worked for the Rwandex Chillington Company in Kigali. He, along with Kabuga, purchased 1,600 machetes from Rwandex between August and December 1993, intending to distribute them to the Interahamwe. During the genocide, Barushimana was part of the contingent evacuated by the French on April 12, 1994. While in exile, ICTR investigators unsuccessfully tried to collaborate with him. Due to insufficient evidence, he was not prosecuted by the ICTR. Dieudonné Niyitegeka, the national treasurer of Interahamwe, cooperated closely with ICTR inspectors to collect information on sensitive cases, especially those involving high-ranking MRND officials. He worked with the ICTR during an operation called Naki in Nairobi in July 1997, aimed at arresting Kambanda, the Prime Minister of the genocidal government, and his co-accused. Niyitegeka cooperated under three conditions. First, not to be prosecuted by the ICTR. Second, to be assisted in his exile with his family outside Africa. Third, to be paid for the information provided to the tribunal, allegedly receiving $30,000. All his demands were met. He was exiled to Canada, and the ICTR prosecutor, Louise Arbour, signed agreements with the Canadian government to protect him. These agreements ensured a change of name, concealing his residence, protecting his family, and more. Furthermore, the agreement stipulated that if the ICTR prosecutor needed to meet him, permission would be sought from Canadian security services, and Niyitegeka would be informed in advance. Since obtaining his status, he ceased cooperation with the ICTR. For example, during the media trial in 2001 involving Ferdinand Nahimana, Jean Bosco Barayagwiza, and Hassan Ngeze, Niyitegeka demanded an immunity commitment from prosecutor Louise Arbour, which she granted on February 5, 2002, exempting him from prosecution for the crime of genocide. Thus, one of the most formidable Interahamwe manipulated the ICTR and should rightfully be in prison. There were 6 national Interahamwe commissioners, including Bernard Maniragaba, Joseph Serugendo, Jean-Pierre Sebanetsi, Ephraim Nyezabera, Jean-Marie Vianney Mudahinyuka alias Zuzu, and Alphonse Kalimba. There is precise information about the fate of 3 of these commissioners. Mudahinyuka arrived in the United States in 2004, where he falsified his identity going by Thierry Rugamba. Based on an arrest warrant issued in 2004 by the Rwanda Prosecutor General's Office, he was arrested and transferred to Rwanda on January 28, 2011. It is important to note that he had already been sentenced in absentia to 19 years in prison by Gacaca courts. Upon his arrest in the United States, he bit off a police officer's finger, one of the main reasons for his detention there before being handed over to Rwanda. Before 1994, Mudahinyuka was a merchant in Kigali and also an auditor in Ministry of Finance. During the genocide, he organized a meeting at Nyamirambo Stadium where he encouraged Hutus to exterminate the Tutsi. He is notably among those responsible for the genocide in Mumena and Nyakabanda, one of the popular neighborhoods in Kigali. Joseph Serugendo was born in 1953 in the Murambi sector of the Satinsky commune in Gisenyi Prefecture. He left Rwanda in 1994, seeking exile in Zaire and later settling in Gabon. Serugendo was among the high-ranking officials of the Interahamwe. However, he managed to go 10 years without being pursued by the ICTR, despite possessing significant information about the officials and agents of RTRM arrested by the tribunal. Serugendo was also part of the board of directors of RTRM, serving as its technical director, a role he held concurrently with being a journalist at Radio Rwanda. He was arrested in Gabon on September 16, 2005 and handed over to the ICTR. He pleaded guilty, which reduced his sentence as he was sentenced to 6 years in prison on June 2, 2006. He passed away from AIDS in August 2006. Ephraim Nyezabera was among the senior executives of the Commercial Bank of Rwanda. He was arrested in Brussels, Belgium in 2004 and subsequently convicted. During his trial, he admitted to arming and financing the Interahamwe with the aim of exterminating the Tutsi. He was sentenced to 30 years for genocide on December 1, 2009. He died in May 2011 from cancer. The other general commissioners, Bernard Maniragaba from Ruhengeri and Jean-Pierre Sebanetsi from Gisenyi, are reported to have passed away. As for Alphonse Kanimba, we currently have no information about his fate. History will remember these individuals as unparalleled murderers who killed their fellow citizens in the name of an ethnic identity that neither they nor their victims had chosen. Check out the rest of our podcast and share them with others